Guest.
Hi, everybody. It's Fridays with Sue and Steph. We're so happy to be here with Tim Gorrell, the Executive Director of Ohio's 529 529 Plan CollegeAdvantage. As many of you know, we are running our college series right now, and this week was week 5, and we had many 529 questions. And so we're bringing Tim on here today to field all of those, because I'm not sure I know anyone who knows more than he does about this. So I'm going to turn it over to Sue to kick us off. We're going to start talking about grandparents. There were many questions about them.
Tim, thanks for fitting us in. I know it was a little bit of a struggle, so thanks so much for being here. So we have a bunch of questions on grandparents. And this comes up whenever 529 comes up. Does money in a 529 plan established by grandparents and in their name for the benefit of the grandchild count against us for financial aid? Now, I think there's a lot of layers to that. First, let's start with, how should a grandparent set up the 529 plan?
I'll dodge the answer or question on that. It depends. There are just many ways to do that. Sometimes grandparents are comfortable contributing to the accounts that parents have established for their grandkids. Other times, grandparents want to set up those accounts and be the account owners on it, so they'll set up the accounts for their grandchildren. No right answer. Either way is a good way to go. What's the bottom line is saving and investing for those children, those beneficiaries, grandchildren's future education expenses.
And does it have a different consequence on the financial aid if they set it up in as their own, or added to your existing 529 plan?
No, it does, and that's something that is part of your strategy, and as you're looking to realize those savings and investment goals. Parents' 529 accounts, whenever students fill out the FAFSA, accounts for 5.64% of could factor into that as far as the aid that a student would receive. Whereas grandparents doesn't get as good a treatment, so to speak, on that. It could be up to 20% as far as the grandparents. So as the rules are now, if the grandparents want to keep control of the account and be the account owner, and if they can delay it, it would be better later on in the student's college career, to start using those funds to pay for the education expenses. Because if they're using it right away, again, it could be up to 20%. However, there's very good news on the horizon here. As a part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, the FAFSA.
Can you repeat? Wait, what's it called? As part of the what?
It's a Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. It's federal law that was recently enacted. And part of the provisions of that address FAFSA. And to that point, about the treatment of grandparents' 529 accounts. And the way that it appears now, this doesn't go into effect until October 1st, 2022, and it's for the 2023-2024 school year. So these rules would change, but as far as that act, then these rules would change, and the grandparents having a 529 account would not be held at a higher rate, against the student. And also on that FAFSA, the questions go from like 100 questions down to 36. I mean, we're talking about grandparents, but that's good news as far as simplifying the FAFSA, and specifically the way that a grandparent's 529 account would be treated and regarding any financial aid that a beneficiary can get.
So all things being equal, if you've got grandparents who are just itching to pay for that education, that would be the way to go, right? If you based on in 2023.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you had somebody very generous trying to figure something out, that would it sounds like there's definite advantages there.
And even now, we've talked before. Best case scenario, when's the best time to open a 529 account for parents or grandparents? Is when that baby's born. And that doesn't always happen. We know that, and we've talked about that before. Don't fret about that. The important thing is to start, whatever the age of that beneficiary is. So if you have very young grandchildren now, and you're opening a 529, or you have a 529 for your grandchildren, you're years off before that's going to come into play. And this new legislation will be enacted, and it'll be it'll be just as way treated the same way that a parent's account would be treated.
Okay, I'm going to quote Tim Gorrell, who said, the best time to open the account is when they're a baby. The second best time is today.
Right.
Tim,
Right.
one of the things that people kind of, when 529 comes up as a discussion, there's always the naysayer who says the tax consequences aren't worth having a 529 savings plan. So tell us why that is not true.
It simply isn't. I mean, I've used my own case as an example. When our children were born in the 90s, we opened mutual funds, and the intention was we'll save and invest for their after high school education, whatever that may be. We achieved the objectives that a 529 would, but we paid tax along the way. Each year, I mean, this is tax season. People are doing their taxes. You look at other funds that you're invested in. You're paying on the dividends, the capital gains. You're paying on interest. You're paying taxes. 529, again, after-tax dollars are invested. They grow tax-free, and whenever they're withdrawn for those qualified expenses, there's no tax consequences. Whenever we pulled money out of those mutual funds for our children, we pay taxes. I had to report that on my taxes. If it had been in a 529, I wouldn't have had that tax consequence. And so there truly is a tax advantage. And here in Ohio and then in 30 other states, there's an additional state tax advantage for investors, residents who invest in those respective 529 plans.
So it's interesting on our the college series is really aimed at juniors, and certainly there are sophomore parents there as well. And there seems to be this feeling of, oh God, we haven't done that. It's too late. My child's a junior. Maybe I should just open a mutual fund or some other account, right? And layered in that also, I'd like to talk about if there's younger siblings, if you can talk about just kind of how those flow, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the important thing is to save. So many people are paralyzed just by that. It's like, well, we're not sure what this child's going to do, or it's too late, or any of a number of reasons. We have other expenses, and any of a number of reasons to talk yourself out of it. The important thing is to save. Many people do turn to banks and savings accounts to save, and you're not going to realize the growth as you would as investing in stock market options. But the important thing is to save and to get started whenever that case may be. And I think with the 529s, there's great flexibility. It's all a matter of having that discussion, or regardless of what, whether it's 529 or anything, that you plan. You may have 2-3 kids. We had a conversation, with a potential account holder here recently, and this person has 3 school-age kids, and they're going into a meeting with their financial advisor, and the financial advisor wanted to talk about 529. Okay, do you set up account for each child? Yes. Do you set up for the oldest because you have gaps between the age of the kids, because the oldest is going to go to school first, and then the youngest may not be for 4 or 5 years after that. Then you have the flexibility that if you have any unused funds, you can transfer them to the younger child. There's advantages in whichever way that you approach this. It's a matter of having a plan. The tax benefit, though, with at least for the state of Ohio, is per beneficiary. So if you only have one account and you're contributing to one beneficiary, you only have that amount that you can take off your Ohio taxable income. But the important thing is, I think, to have that conversation, to have a plan. It's not wrong to have an account for each child. It's not wrong to have maybe for 2 of them. It just depends. But I think it's important to regard, recognize that you should and need to save, because there's just very few full ride scholarships out there. And even if you are getting some aid, and even if you are getting some scholarship, it's probably going towards tuition and perhaps fees. you still have room and board, you have books, computers, these other types of expenses. And so it's good to have resources available to address those costs.
So Stephanie has some questions in our comments. One is, if she does have a 529 for her son, can they still qualify for scholarships and financial aid? That's number one. And number two is, what if they choose culinary or trade school versus a state school? Can they still use it?
Oh, wow. Did you plant that question?
Nope, not at all.
We would have if we had thought of it.
I know, yeah. No, that's an excellent question and very, very common. And so the 529 is not going, again, with need or based aid, as a parent, as the account holder right now, it could reduce that aid up to 5.64%. So you have $10,000 saved in your 529, and in the students being considered for aid, it could be reduced $564 as very, very simplistic, way of looking at that. As far as other scholarships and other things that are, come into play as far as resources, the 529 does not, deter those. And if anything, your 529, like we've had examples of individuals that exactly that's they get aid, they get scholarships, they use very little of their 529 for their undergraduate work, and then they decide at a later date to continue their schooling, go back for a master's degree, change, and the 529 has no shelf life. It'll continue to grow, and it's there for those resources. And as we said, you have flexibility that if the one beneficiary had scholarships and different resources available to pay for those education opportunities, then you can transfer it to other children, other grandchildren, other relatives. And as far as culinary school, any trade school, technical school, 2-year, 4-year, in-state, out-of-state, public, private, education entity that has a federal code or they receive federal funds, you can use your 529. And I think that's a really important question, because people think, well, if you go to cosmetology school, or you go to culinary school, or you go to welding school, or you pick the entity, there's costs associated with that, and your 529, can help you pay for that.
So it's funny. There's a question from the other night about I think as parents, we're always trying to figure out kind of the formula and how do you know if you've saved enough. So there was a question from a parent of a middle schooler. How much? What's that target number, and how do you figure that out? And do you have some guidelines on your site?
Yeah. And again, the answer to that is it depends, and I would invite anyone to come to our site at collegeadvantage.com, and we have tools, and there's a calculator. And it's interesting. This past weekend, my brother was visiting, and he has a 529 account for his son, our nephew, and they live in Tennessee. He has an account here, and then his spouse has an account in another plan. And so he said they have X amount of dollars saved already. And so if their son went to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, would they have enough? And how much more exactly that should they contribute? But I invited him to do just that, to plug in that school. You can plug in a specific school if you have one in mind, in-state, out-of-state. Again, any of those entities, technical, trade, and it asks you, how much do you have saved right now? You plug that number in. How much are you contributing now, or do you see yourself contributing either monthly or on an annual basis? And then what's the age of the beneficiary? So if you have a 5-year-old and you think that they want to go to, you pick the school and you plug that in there, how much you've saved now, how much you're putting in, and it'll give you a graphic and saying you'll have, in the case of my brother, when he plugged that in, he'll have continuing the course that he has, he'll have nearly 70%, and that includes tuition, fees, room and board. And so it says if you want to get to 100%, you need to increase your contributions by X amount of dollars. Or some people, maybe they'll be comfortable with that, because it can be overwhelming. You don't have to save everything. Every dollar that you save is one that doesn't come from somewhere else. And so maybe the goal, the parents or grandparents are thinking, we'll save half or we'll save 70%. And then the other part has to come from other resources and perhaps even, the beneficiary working, or, there's just different approaches to it. So again, I'd say come to our website, plug the numbers in as you're forming your plan and your goals. I think you'll be well informed, and so you'll know exactly where you're going to stand at that time when that beneficiary graduates and are ready to go off to that opportunity after high school.
It's a great thing to have your kid involved with too.
Yeah.
Let them see the numbers.
Tim, this is a question. I like to ask questions I know the answers to. I don't know the answer to this, so I hope I'm not taking you down a bad path. But the expected family contribution. So that is not guaranteed. That is a FAFSA number that gets sent to you and sent to the colleges you're applying to, but it doesn't mean the college gives you all that money, correct?
Right.
So the reason I'm bringing it up is because your expected family contribution is going to change if you have a FAFSA. It's going to increase your expected family contribution, which would then decrease if a school met 100% need. So I think when people hear that, they say, well, then why should I bother? But the equation still works out, I think, in favor of the person who saved, because that's money in the bank. Is that true?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you bring up an interesting point of just exactly that, the terminology. And at the beginning of our conversation, that legislation, it changes that language. I don't have that specifically right in front of me, but the way that term.
It's going to be student aid index or something like that?
Yes, that's it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why should I, like, someone asked us the question, like, we're really scraping by on our salaries, and we hear that it's going to impact the outcome of what we're calling today EFC, expected family contribution. So they're thinking maybe it's not worth it for them to try to take some money and put it into a 529.
I know, but is that going to cover all of it? And again, I just use that example that the money that you save is I think it's invaluable because a lot of times, and I mean, there's kids are brilliant. I mean, there's a lot of smart kids, very gifted children out there, and there's a number of sources that they may get scholarships. The economic situation of a family may be as such that they are going to qualify for a lot of aid. I'll give you another example. There was a friend of ours, her son went to Ohio Northern University here in Ohio. And, and she was in a situation, and this was before she knew me and in my advocating 529, she qualified for a lot of aid, because of their economic situation, and paid for a lot. As you know, the Ohio Northern is not an expensive school, and yet, he went through school. He did not avoid loans. He still has student loans. Fortunately, he got an engineering degree. He's gone to a very good job, but he's still for a while going to be paying back student loans, even with a very generous aid package that they qualified for. And I guess that's the best way of addressing it is that, aid will come in. There's a consideration as far as, the 529 in it, but there's still potentially expenses. And I would recommend Aaron in favor of saving and investing and having that, because the enemy here is loan debt. And
that's well said. That's really well said. And it's funny, Christina in our chat said the short answer is just keep saving, which is and that it's so true. And I think that, for parents, this is a really big piece. It's a big worry. We could see it from the questions the other night. You have a ton of great information on the site, collegeadvantage.com. I will invite everybody to visit there. Any other questions you can shoot our way. And Tim, thank you for making yourself available. You guys are just great partner and always full of information and things that we didn't think about. So thank you. It's
My pleasure. It's good being with you this morning. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here with us. See you next week.